Well, hello everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, publisher of Walls and Ceilings, Roofing Contractor and Building Enclosure. Art Eisner, the editor of Roofing Contractor, and I are honored to be visiting today with Trent Cotney, the CEO of Cotney Construction Law. And I'd like to take a moment and congratulate Trent on receiving the Earl Bank Memorial Heart Award, which is given each year to an FRSA associate member who most exemplifies the giving nature that the late Mr. Blank was known for in his work with the association. So congratulations, Trent. And Trent, I really don't know much about Mr. Blank. Do you have a history on him?
Earl Blank was a tremendous force within the industry, and especially within FRSA. He was known just for his service and his giving nature, and the award means the world to me. I've already told everybody at FRSA how happy I was to receive it. It's it's one thing to be recognized by my peers, but when I'm recognized by the industry, that's what's really important to me. So it really truly means a lot, and I was very surprised, and I feel very fortunate and honored to be to have an award, especially named after Earl Blank, which is in my eyes sort of one of the pillars of the industry.
There is no doubt. And what a better association than FRSA right down there in your neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. If any of you are not following Trent on social media yet, make sure you are, because he always has great nuggets and information that he is so generous to give out about just legal insights. And since we've really spoke last week, Trent, kind of going back to COVID and just what's happening in the contracting world, the biggest news making waves around the country are President Trump's 4 executive orders issued over the weekend regarding COVID-19. Can you tell us what do contractors need to know?
Sure, and Jill, Art, always a pleasure. I really enjoy being able to talk to you guys weekly because it allows me to sort of get the news out there to your listeners and your audience. And it's my job has, instead of been 5 days a week, it's now 7 days a week. And for those of you that were watching the news, this executive order and the memorandums that came along with it came out on Saturday. So, I'm downloading it, already taking notes, trying to figure stuff out, because I know first thing Monday morning, actually I was hit up on Saturday, but first thing Monday morning, I've got to be ready and start firing on it. So here's what's interesting about this. And this is what I want everyone to kind of clue into, because there's a lot of politics here, right? So from a political standpoint, Trump made a very smart move, right? He came out with this executive order and the memorandum that went along with it that said, look, we're going to do these 4 things, okay? And I'm just summarizing it briefly. The 4 things were, the unemployment supplemental benefit ran out, right? It ran out at the end of July. It said, we're going to give you $400 more up until December, okay? The issue there is it's not really $400, okay? And not to get too much into the weeds, 75% of it has to come from allocated FEMA funds of roughly $44 billion, which is federal money. The other percentage comes from state funds, okay? So the state has to kick in the extra dollar amount, and governors have the ability to opt out of this altogether. So here's what the issue is yes, on paper, this sounds great. $400 more a month, everyone's yay. Here's the downside of it, okay? Implementation of this, okay? It doesn't happen overnight. Getting a government to do anything quick is almost an impossibility. So the implementation of how this works could take weeks to figure out what's going to happen, okay? The other things that were kind of brought to the table were the suggestion that that HUD and other federal agencies look at ways to ease the restriction, to ease landlord-tenant related issues and possible evictions. Okay, there are certain things that the federal government can do to help. There are some federal assistance type programs that were being offered through these supplemental memorandums that he put out. Student loans was another thing that was very interesting. Basically saying that if you've got a student loan from the Department of Education, you can withhold your payment up to the end of the year. It's due at the end of the year. You're not going to have to pay interest on that. And there was some suggestion that he wants the Treasury Department to look into the possibility of actually waiving those. Now, not curious on timing, right? You got elections in November, you got this thing through December, and it's like, well, let's look at this, we'll see what we can do. So a little promise thrown out there. Last thing they did was payroll tax, and this is something that as an employer, and I know the people listening to this are also very keen on, I was like, please let it be the employer payroll tax, please, because that helps us, right? Please. It wasn't. It was the employee payroll tax. And basically what it said is they were going to reduce that amount up through a certain period. I believe it was December. And the average employee contribution there is roughly 6-7%. So it would be some additional amount of money that employees would have in place. Okay. Here's the issue with this. Okay. The issue with this is that the executive order could be subject to challenge. Okay. Put my lawyer hat on, my job. I see some constitutional challenges. I see some legal challenges there. We already talked about implementation challenges. So I think there's going to be some ongoing issues there as far as whether or not that gets implemented.
So Trent, let me follow up on that. If assuming that the executive orders do stand up, if they are legal, is there then still pressure on Congress to do something to perhaps get a better deal for people that need COVID-19 relief?
All right, that's a great question. And let me tell you, Congress is still working on trying to get something together, and really they need to. I think the executive order was basically sort of a slap in the face saying, I'm going to do something if you're not, and I'm going to get the political gain from it if you don't. So I think one of the things that's happening is that I would anticipate that a more robust stimulus act is going to be passed here in the next week or so. Okay, I think they're going to come to terms. They may end up taking a lot of the components that were issued in the executive order and adding them to the stimulus act. They may cover various amounts. There's still a lot of political wrangling going on. Okay, a lot of back and forth, but it's clear that something needs to be done. Okay, there's a lot of different issues there. This is a very, very complex, politically heated issue in an election year. So I would anticipate, if I were a betting man, I would say, look, in the next week or so, I think you're probably going to see Congress come up with something. Okay, if they don't, if there's continued infighting, then we could be in a situation where there's this executive order out there, there's an attempt to implement this stuff, but due to procedural issues and possible legal challenges, it may not go through. Okay, so you've got a bunch of different possibilities that can happen, but I can tell you, Congress wants to pass something. It is an election year. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, you want to take credit for doing something.
Got it. Well, you said you were already getting calls on this Saturday. Tell us, what else are contractors hitting you up about since we last spoke?
So this is something I want the listeners to really pay attention to, okay? Delay claims, okay? Delay claims, there are always two sides of a delay claim, okay? We all know what delays are, right? You've had COVID-19 shutdowns, protest-related shutdowns, inclement weather, the owner's not ready. Those are delays, right? That's one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin is what's known as acceleration claims. Okay, so let's say I'm a roofing contractor or I'm doing work on a building envelope, right? And I was supposed to start in March. Okay, that was when my schedule was supposed to start. But because of delays, COVID-19 or otherwise, the contractor's telling me to start now. Well, if I start now, all this other work I had scheduled won't get done. So I can't mobilize to get that stuff done unless I work overtime and I work weekends. That's what's known as an acceleration claim, because what they are doing is they are asking you to work in a quicker amount of time than what was originally scheduled. Okay, it's two sides of the same coin. So one of the things that we have been getting a lot of calls on are from contractors where their customer, whether it's a contractor or an owner, has said, you're delaying my job. Why aren't you out here doing this job? You need to mobilize immediately. You need to get out here and do this. Well, the other side to that is, if you look at what the schedule was for this job, we were supposed to start 4 months ago. We were ready to start 4 months ago. You weren't, okay? So now we need to make a claim on you because you are asking us to hire more labor, work overtime, work on the weekends, right? It's a very complex contractual issue. You really got to dive into it. But we've gotten a lot of questions about that, and I think we're going to even see more as the weeks and months continue.
For contractors that haven't been through that yet, what's the first step if they get that kind of a claim?
So the first step, if you think you have any issue with either getting a delay claim coming against you or trying to make a claim against a customer or an owner, the first thing you need to do is fly spec your contract. I like to use country sayings, right? So fly spec means you need to look at every single aspect of it down to the point you actually see a fly spec on there, right? So the key things that you're looking for is you're looking for claims, delays. There's a clause known as a no damages for delay clause, which means you're entitled to time but not cost. Suspensions. You want to flag these key provisions. And here's the critical thing that I want everybody to listen to, okay? You've got to make sure that you're following your notice provisions. You must follow that contract to the T, because what's going to happen is a bad guy lawyer is going to get it and say, this contract said you needed to give me notice within 14 days of getting this claim. You didn't give me notice. Therefore, you don't get your claim. Okay. And there's ways around that. I'd be out of a job if I couldn't figure out a way around that. But I'm just telling you, make sure that you check your contract. This is a detail-oriented assignment. It is not an easy assignment proving or defending delays.
Okay, good advice there. We're seeing some more instances of OSHA COVID-19 enforcement over the last few weeks. Are you getting the impression that they're stepping up that enforcement? What are you hearing? Absolutely.
We've had a big uptick in OSHA inspections as a result of COVID-19 whistleblower type claims. One of the things, there's really two things that I would recommend to any contractor that's listening to this. One is education. Okay, one of the first questions that any OSHA inspector is going to ask, regardless of whether it's a federal or a state plan, is whether or not your employees were properly trained on CDC and OSHA guidelines as it relates to COVID-19 safety. Okay, if your employees say, no, we've had no training, that didn't look good for you. So make sure you've got your toolbox talks, your regular meetings, your safety checks in place so you can show that you've done that. Okay. The second thing that you really want to do is you want to make sure that you are taking the proper precautions on the job site. Okay, one of the things that we've noticed is that OSHA is going to job sites to check commonly used areas, check crew cab usage, check whether or not you're sanitizing, all those types of things. Okay, and this may be in addition to normal safety protocols, but what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to tell OSHA that yes, you've got a job site protection plan. These are the steps that are followed. And it's critical, not necessarily for the crew to be able to regurgitate that, but for whoever's manning that job as a leader, okay, whether it's a crew leader, a superintendent, a foreman, or a project manager, they need to be able to spout off chapter and verse as to what the issues are, okay? And this is what we're doing to safeguard against it. So if OSHA comes out, you have the ability to say, okay, hey, we are doing this. These are the steps that we're taking.
Got it. We've also talked about liability waivers for companies quite a bit throughout this crisis. If nothing's being done on the federal level, or if that's one of the negotiation sticking points in Congress, states are beginning to take some action too. I think one example was Georgia. What's happening with that at the state level, and what do contractors need to do?
Yeah, so the legal liability shield, which is sort of what it's being called, that's something that both states and the federal government are looking at. It is part of the negotiations for the current stimulus round. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of back and forth on it. A lot of states now have draft versions of legislation that is in preliminary stages of getting passed. And those states are Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, Utah, Wyoming. Okay, you mentioned Georgia. Georgia in particular is something that I think is worth talking about. Their act is the Georgia COVID-19 Pandemic Business Safety Act. That's a mouthful, right? But here's what's interesting about this act, and I think this act is a great model for other states to kind of follow. What's interesting is it's not a get out of jail free card. So if you have intentionally given someone COVID, okay, you're not going to be able to walk away from that. It's not a complete shield from liability. It's also exempts out workers' comp claims. Okay, so if you have a potential claim related to workplace, that may be exempted. But what's interesting is that the act gives business owners a vehicle to shift liability on people that are visiting their retail space or their job sites or whatever. It actually has suggested language that you can post on your door saying, you're assuming the risk if you come in here that you might get COVID under this Georgia law. This is what might be the case, okay? So that's what I find interesting, is it provides safeguards for business owners to potentially protect themselves from liability. I am confident that something is going to be done, if not on the federal level, then almost every state, because I think that it's going to be such a significant concern that you're going to see a big outpouring of lobbying money to support the changes that need to be made.
How important would something like contact tracing really be to kind of litigate a claim like that? I mean, you would really have to know who is coming into your building and where they've been.
Yeah, and it becomes very difficult to prove how somebody got COVID-19. So one of the things that some of these states are wrangling with is the burden of proof that you need to be able to show to demonstrate it. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on it, but the basic is that if these statutes can elevate the burden of proof to show you actually have to be able to show some kind of clear and convincing evidence that they got it, that's such a high threshold that it makes it almost impossible to show. So that's another thing that I've seen some states do, is get away from sort of a preponderance of evidence to this clear and convincing standard that might be a little bit more difficult. Obviously, there's going to be some legal challenges, legal wrangling. None of this is set in stone yet, so stay tuned for more.
Okay. Your Cottney Consulting Group recently wrote a column for roofingcontractor.com that delves into the company's use of Smartsheet solutions and some other tech. What will contractors get out of that piece?
So one of the things that in talking to roofing contractors and other contractors all over the U.S. and Canada, one of the things that we hear repeatedly is, we've got great software, none of it communicates with each other. And my accounting software doesn't communicate with my CRM. My CRM doesn't communicate with my billing, this and that. Okay. And one of the things that we like about Smartsheet is the way that I describe it is, it's like an operating system for your company. Okay. It lays over all your existing software. It doesn't matter what you're using, but it provides clear, clean dashboards and allows everything to communicate seamlessly. I don't know about you, but I'm not an Excel spreadsheet kind of guy. I like charts and bar graphs, and give me flashy graphics. That's what I'm going to pay attention to as a business owner, right? So if you're like me, this is perfect, because this gets you all in one place, allows everything to communicate. Everybody's on the same page. We've implemented it here in our company, and it's changed things overnight. Instead of wondering where that laptop is I sent to Portland, I don't have to. It's right in front of my face if I want to find it, and that's the great thing about it.
Okay, well, certainly like to direct people to go ahead and read that and other content on the website. Jill, back to you.
Thank you, Art. And again, thank you, Trent, for all your great insight. It's always great to spend time with you. For everybody watching, if you need to reach us, please go to roofingcontractor.com or wconline.com. Click on the Contact Us page, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe for free for our digital edition and our free e-newsletter, so you can always know when these interviews are happening with Trent. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks again, Trent.
Thank you.